Make no mistake about it, guys. Notre Dame will be in a rebuild year this year, but the question is, how big of a step back will they take? Well, I'm here to break it down for you. Let's go. Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's me again, Golden Blue Dude, and if you haven't already, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. I do college football videos every single day, so if you don't like this video, you'll find one that you will enjoy. Notre Dame, Notre Dame, Notre Dame. That's who we're talking about in this video, and I do think this will be a rebuild year for Notre Dame. That doesn't mean that Notre Dame's going to be horrific or miss a ball or anything like that. I just don't think that they're going to be as good as they were last year, and their streak of double-digit win season could snap this year. Let's take a look at this. First and foremost, Notre Dame did lose quarterback Ian Book, but they did get transfer Jack Cohn from Wisconsin. The problem with that is Jack Cohn is very up and down. When he's good, he's great, but when he's bad, he's terrible. And it doesn't help that they're going to have to rebuild that offensive line. So Jack Cohn might have to use his legs more than what he's comfortable doing. They do get running back Kyrene Williams back, so that's a plus for Notre Dame. But those wide receivers need to get better. They have decent depth at the wide receiver position, but nobody really explosive or the go-to or the big playmaker. Notre Dame's bread and butter under Brian Kelly has been their defense. They've relied on their defense heavily, and I do think their defense will be fine. They'll be okay. But make no mistake about it, they will miss the presence of Koromora. He was their best tackler, their biggest playmaker. So even though I don't think their defense will take a huge step back, they will miss the presence of Koromora. His leadership, he was talented, skilled, athletic. He was the total package when it comes to Notre Dame's defense. And it will be a tough hole to fill for Notre Dame on that defensive spot. And to go along with that, they lost their defensive coordinator, Clark Lee, to Vanderbilt. He took the head coaching job. So now the defense is going to have to learn a whole new defensive scheme. I think this is going to be a tricky year for Notre Dame. Another thing that makes me think that Notre Dame will take a step back, and that's their schedule. They have a tough schedule this year. If we look at last year, Notre Dame was barely beating teams that they should have been throttling, but then out of the blue, they beat North Carolina convincingly. They beat the #1 team, Clemson, even though Clemson was missing their biggest playmakers on defense, and of course Trevor Lawrence, their quarterback, on offense. What happens? They get a rematch with Clemson at full strength, and they get dismantled. Then they go to the playoffs and they get dismantled again. So how good really was Notre Dame last year? Here's a look at their schedule real quick. Right off the bat at Florida State. This is not a gimme game. Florida State will be much better this year. I think Florida State makes a bowl. So don't be super shocked if somehow the Seminoles pulled off the upset. It is in Doak Campbell Stadium and it's going to be hostile. After that, a home game against Toledo, a home game against Purdue, a neutral game against Wisconsin in Chicago. I have Wisconsin contending for the Big Ten West this year. The Wisconsin fan base, they travel well. I know Notre Dame does as well, but Wisconsin's fan base is a little more raucous, so they might actually have a slight home field advantage in that. So I definitely think that is a probable loss for Notre Dame. And then right after that, they come back home and play Cincinnati, and Cincinnati returns pretty much everybody from that great team from last year. And Notre Dame could possibly be licking their wounds from a loss to Wisconsin, and they could end up losing to Cincinnati as well. But I think the more probable scenario is that they'll lose one of those two games. After that, at Virginia Tech, that could be tricky on the road, but Virginia Tech is bad, so I will give Notre Dame the benefit of the doubt on that. After that, they get BYU. BYU's not going to be any good. That'll be a win. After the BYU game, they get a home game against USC. The Trojans are going to be pretty good this year. I think they'll contend for the Pac-12 South. And let's face it, Notre Dame doesn't really have a great home field advantage. Trust me, I've talked to Notre Dame fans. They've told me there's still a lot of elderly Notre Dame fans that go to Notre Dame Stadium to watch Notre Dame games, and that the ushers will come around and tell you to sit down and be quiet if you're around that area so they can sit and watch and enjoy the game. So that's definitely a losable game, and it's a rivalry. After that, another home game against North Carolina. So I think Notre Dame could lose one or both of those games as well. Then at Virginia, then a home game against Georgia Tech, and then at Stanford. That's not a gimme game either. Stanford was much, much, much better last year. They finished the season 4-2, a winning season. Don't overlook Stanford. So yes, I do believe Notre Dame takes a step back in 2021. I think their final record will be 9-3, so their double-digit win season does get snapped. 9-3 is not a terrible season. That's still a good bowl, especially with the Notre Dame brand. They're going to give you the best bowl possible with that record. Having said that, 8-4 or 7-5 is not out of the realm of possibility. So don't be shocked if Notre Dame ends up with 7-5, 8-4, or 9-3. I just don't think they're going to get to that 10-win season mark. And if you think about it, that's not bad for a rebuild season. West Virginia, my team, we would take that in a heartbeat. In a rebuild season, West Virginia is lucky to be 5-7. Don't complain too much, Notre Dame fans. That's not terrible for a rebuild season. That's all I got for you for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on my next show.